Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. We always love hearing your investment ideas and we break them down for you. Today, we're looking at Pony AI. It's a listener request, and it's a company that just went public. Seems like everyone's buzzing about it.
They are. And for good reason, I'd say. I mean, they're working in the autonomous vehicle space, and that has huge potential. Like, think about it. Self-driving cars, robo-taxis, delivery bots, even, autonomous trucking could be on the horizon,
Okay, so break it down for me. Like, what does Pony AI actually do?
Well, they're basically developing the brains behind all these different kinds of autonomous vehicles. So we're talking about software and AI, the kind of tech that lets vehicles just drive around and make decisions without any human input.
So they're not really building the cars themselves. More about the technology that drives them, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's a really hot market to be in. They just launched on the Nasdaq, IPO priced at $13 a share. They're trading under the ticker symbol PONY. There's a lot of excitement around this one. Our listener even included a source mentioning that ADSs were approved for listing on the Nasdaq Global Select Market, by the way. Trading started November 27th. 2024.
Now, IPOs, they can be a bit of a wild ride, can't they? Just because there's early excitement doesn't always mean long-term success.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's important to look past all the hype and really get into those fundamentals. And speaking of fundamentals, our listener gave us some projections from Simply Walsant that I thought were really interesting. They're predicting annual earnings growth of 37.8% and revenue growth of 42.9% for Pony AI. Pretty impressive.
Those numbers sound incredible.
Yeah.
But what's making people so optimistic? I mean, are those projections realistic?
So a lot of it has to do with the projected growth of the entire autonomous vehicle market. More and more cities are opening up to testing and even early deployments of self-driving vehicles. Pony AI is already working in some key markets, in the US and also in China.
You mentioned China. It seems like their success in that market is a big part of the story with Pony AI. Why is that such a big deal?
Well, China is expected to be a major player in autonomous vehicle technology. Their government's really invested in its development, and there's a huge potential customer base there. Pony AI has done a really good job of getting partnerships with big Chinese companies like Toyota and GAC Group.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's also about having the right partnerships, the kind that can help deploy that technology on a larger scale.
Exactly. And that's a big advantage Pony AI seems to have, especially in China. They're not just developing great technology, they're also building a strong ecosystem around it. So that includes things like collaborations with vehicle manufacturers, mapping companies, even local governments.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's be realistic for a moment. Every company has its challenges, right? What are some of the hurdles Pony AI might run into as they grow and scale?
Regulatory uncertainty is a big one. Rules around autonomous vehicles are still changing, both in the US and globally, so that can create a lot of uncertainty for companies.
Yeah, it's like the Wild West out there when it comes to regulation. Nobody wants to stop innovation, but safety has to come first.
And speaking of safety, that's another huge challenge. Developing autonomous driving systems that are both safe and reliable, it's incredibly complex. You need massive amounts of data, sophisticated algorithms, and a ton of testing. You have to make sure these vehicles can handle anything that comes up. Real-world scenarios. Not to mention the public perception. Some people are still scared of self-driving cars, right? So companies like Pony AI have to get over that and build trust with the public.
You raise a good point about past performance. Our listeners sent us some data that paints a bit of a different picture. Pony AI's earnings, they've actually been going down, haven't they?
Yeah, that's true. Their earnings have been declining at an average rate of negative 22.6% every year. However, we have to look at the whole picture. While their earnings have been declining, their revenues have actually been growing at a pretty good rate, about 16.6% a year on average.
That's interesting. Their revenues are going up, but their earnings are going down. What's going on there?
It looks like analysts are looking past those current financials and focusing more on the company's future potential. The autonomous vehicle market is projected to grow exponentially, and Pony AI is in a good spot to take advantage of that. They're putting a lot of money into research and development, they're expanding into new markets, and they're building those strategic partnerships. All of this is pointing to a bright future, even if the current earnings haven't caught up yet.
So it sounds like a bit of a gamble then. Investors are betting on the company's long-term potential, even though their current performance might not be the best.
Definitely a case of weighing the potential rewards against the risks. This is where independent research comes in. We've talked about some things to consider. But ultimately, the decision comes down to you and your individual investment goals and your risk tolerance. Are you okay with investing in a company that's in its early stages? Maybe with the potential for explosive growth, but also a lot of volatility. Or are you looking for something more established? Something with a proven track record, but maybe less upside.
Those are some great questions for our listeners to think about. But before we go any further, let's talk about those analyst ratings for a minute. Stockanalysis.com says the consensus is a strong buy with an average 12-month price target of $19.20. That sounds pretty bullish.
It does, but we can't forget that analyst predictions aren't always right. They can give us a sense of the sentiment, but they're not guarantees. And we should remember that the price target range is between $18 and $20. So even among analysts, there are different opinions.
Yeah, always a good reminder to do your own research and not just follow everyone else.
Yeah.
Speaking of different perspectives, our listener also sent us an analysis from CoinCodex. They're predicting a price of $19.75 per share by March 5th, 2025, which would be a pretty big jump. But they also say that the current market sentiment for Pony AI is bearish.
That's interesting. So there's long-term optimism, but also short-term hesitation. CoinCodex says this is due to a fear signal from something called the Fear and Greed Index. It basically measures market sentiment. And we can't forget about the price volatility. Pony AI stock has fluctuated 5.45% over the past 30 days.
So even with all the potential, there's definitely some risk involved.
For sure. And that's why doing your homework is so important. We've looked at projections, analyst opinions, and market sentiment. Now it's your turn. What stands out to you? What questions do you still have? What about Pony AI makes you want to dig a little deeper?
What about the competition? I mean, they're not the only ones in this market, right?
Yeah. Oh, no, definitely not. It's a crowded space with some big players. You've got the established ones like Waymo, Cruise, and Aurora. They're all trying to get their share of the self-driving market. And then, of course, there's Tesla. They're doing things a little differently, but they're still a major force.
So where does Pony AI fit in? What makes them different from all the others?
Well, their focus on China, that's a big thing. They've really become a leader in that region. And China is predicted to be a huge growth area for these autonomous vehicles. Plus, they've got some great partnerships with key players over there, like Toyota.
Yeah, that Toyota partnership is interesting. I bet it's more than just Toyota providing cars for them to put their tech in, right?
Yeah, you're right. It gives them access to Toyota's manufacturing know-how, which is going to be really important for scaling up production. And don't forget, it could give them a global distribution network, something a lot of their competitors don't have because they're mostly focused on software.
So it sounds like Pony AI is thinking long term. They're not just trying to win the software race, they're building a whole ecosystem.
Right. And it's working. I mean, they've already launched robo-taxi services in a bunch of Chinese cities, and they're testing in California, too. They're definitely making moves to strengthen their position.
It sounds like they're making progress.
Yeah.
But every company has weaknesses, right? What are some things that investors should keep an eye on with Pony AI?
Well, like we talked about before, regulatory uncertainty. The rules around autonomous vehicles are changing so fast, and that can create problems and unexpected costs for these companies.
Yeah, you've got to stay on top of the regulations and be ready for changes.
Definitely. And another challenge is just how complex the technology is. Making a safe and reliable self-driving system, that's really hard. It takes a lot of data, really sophisticated algorithms, and tons of testing. You got to make sure those vehicles can handle anything. Obstacles, bad weather, you name it.
It sounds like the pressure's on, not just for the company's sake, but for public safety too.
Absolutely. And then there's public perception. A lot of people are still nervous about self-driving cars. Companies like Pony AI, they need to overcome that fear and build public trust. That's crucial.
So they need to win over investors and the general public? That's a lot to juggle.
Exactly. They need to prove that their tech is safe, it works, and it's good for everyone. And that means dealing with worries about jobs, data privacy, and of course, making sure accidents don't happen.
So it sounds like Pony AI and the whole autonomous vehicle industry has its work cut out. They need to stay ahead in technology, figure out all the regulations, and make the public feel good about it, all while going up against some pretty tough competition.
Yeah, it's a tall order. But if they manage to do it, the rewards could be massive. This market, it's projected to be worth trillions in the next few years. So whoever comes out on top is going to benefit big time.
So for anyone thinking about investing in Pony AI, this is where things get really interesting. You have to weigh the potential for growth with the risks and challenges.
This is where you got to do your own research. Don't just rely on the headlines and what analysts say. Really look into Pony AI's technology, their business model, their partnerships, and their competition.
Think about your own goals as an investor and how much risk you're comfortable with. Are you okay with the ups and downs that come with a young company? One that could be huge, but is still in its early stages.
Or do you want something more established? Something with a solid track record, but maybe not as much growth potential. These are the questions you need to ask yourself before investing.
And just remember, we're here to give you the information to help you make smart investment decisions. But in the end, the decision is up to you.
Now, speaking of making decisions, let's talk about something else that's crucial when you're evaluating Pony AI. Their financials. We've touched on their revenue growth and those declining earnings, but there's more to it than that.
All right, so let's dig into those financials a little bit more.
Okay, so we've talked about revenue growth and those declining earnings, but there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, I mean, how can investors make sense of those two things,
Yeah.
Seems a little contradictory.
Well, you have to remember that revenue and earnings don't always match up perfectly. A company can have tons of revenue, but still not make a profit. And that's pretty common with companies that are growing really fast, like Pony AI. They're spending a lot on R&D. They're expanding into new markets, and they're trying to scale up their operations. All of that takes money, so it might hurt their profits in the short term.
So those declining earnings, a bad sign?
Not always. It depends on how they're handling those losses. And if there's a plan to become profitable, investors need to look at whether Pony AI's investments make sense, and if they can keep it up. Or are they just spending money without a real plan? That's why it's important to dig into their financials and look at things like their burn rate.
Makes sense. You can't just look at revenue. You have to understand the costs, too,
Yeah.
and how they're managing them.
Exactly. And another thing to consider is their debt. How much are they borrowing to grow? And what are the terms of those loans? Lots of debt can be risky, especially if interest rates go up or the company doesn't perform well.
So investors need to balance the excitement of potential growth with a careful look at the financials.
Definitely. And let's not forget the big picture. You know the economy. We've got high inflation right now, and interest rates are rising. That can have a big impact on companies like Pony AI, especially ones that are still young and not consistently profitable.
Right. The economy can make or break any company, no matter how great their tech is.
It really comes down to this. Pony AI has huge potential, but there are also risks. There's no right or wrong answer about whether to invest. You have to weigh the pros and cons. Think about their financials, their competition, the regulations, and of course, your own goals and risk tolerance.
We've given you a lot to think about today. Now it's your turn to do your own research. Look at all sides of the story and decide if Pony AI is the right investment for you.
Investing is all about balancing risk and reward. Nothing is guaranteed. But if you do your research and take your time, you can improve your chances of making good decisions.
And that wraps up this episode of Investing Talk Podcast. If you like what you heard today, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. We talk about all kinds of things: stocks, market trends, personal finance tips, you name it.
And don't forget to share this episode with anyone you know who might be interested in Pony AI or autonomous vehicles.
Your support helps us grow and lets us keep bringing you great content. Oh, and one more thing. If you have any thoughts or questions about Pony AI or any other investment ideas, leave a comment down below.
We always appreciate your feedback, and we're always looking for ways to get better. So keep learning, stay informed, and happy investing.